welcome to Fox Soul's Black Report. This is the space where we bring you Black America's headline news, views, and opinions. Our guy Romeo is back next week, but the rest of the team is here today. I'm Brooke Thomas.
I'm Demi.
Peace and love. I'm Nielle.
And Soulmates, on today's report, students from Arizona who are on a hunger strike, they're here today to talk to us about why they chose to take extreme measures to protect voting rights. And the medical company that benefited from Henrietta Lacks files a motion to dismiss her family's lawsuit.
We have the CDC's latest recommendations regarding COVID vaccines. Plus, student loan payments begin soon. What you need to know. And get ready for this. A full breakdown on Fox Soul's very first scripted movie. You're going to want to see this interview.
Soulmates, we have that and so much more. You know why? Because it's our voice and it's our truth. So let's talk about it.
Hey there, Soulmates. Thank you for joining us this Friday. Let's get to our top story. More than 20 college students are on a hunger strike in protest of stalled voting rights legislation in D.C. The students stopped eating last week. Brandon Ortega is a third-year Arizona State University student. He told the Washington Post, quote, "We'd rather suffer through this hunger strike than to suffer the consequences of this bill not being passed."
Soulmates, joining us now from Washington, D.C. is two of the students participating in the hunger strike for voting rights. Welcome, Jocelyn Garcia and Adrienne Horton. Welcome to the Black Report.
Thank you so much for having us here.
Thank you so much. We're excited.
I'm so honored to have you here. I just want you to know that we really appreciate what you all are doing. Take us back to the beginning and talk to us why you felt that this extreme measure was what needed to be done to bring awareness to the stalled bills of voting rights on Capitol Hill.
Sure. So to be clear, this wasn't our first choice. You know, we didn't want to have to take such an extreme measure, but we have been lobbying our senators through phone calls every single day, emails to their offices, tagging them on social media, even meeting with their offices in constituency meetings over Zoom for the last 10 months. And so this isn't just something that we decided to do out of nowhere. We've been fighting for what was originally the For the People Act and then later became the Freedom to Vote Act. So we felt like it was time to really escalate and just create a sense of urgency for this campaign, which is why we chose this method. And so in terms of escalation, you can choose something that is obstructionist, such as, you know, closing down a highway or something. But we really felt that young people have the moral authority to call for voting rights because it affects our future. And so we felt that the method of escalation should match that. And a hunger strike really is making a moral plea on this issue. So it was a response of the inaction shown by specifically the Senate and the Biden administration and the lack of urgency that they had.
So I want to first start off by saying your acts are absolutely commendable, and we thank you so much for taking time out to speak with us today. Now, you were protesting in front of the White House just yesterday. You just mentioned Joe Biden. Have you heard from the Biden administration at all?
So we have been in contact with the White House, and before we decided to have a hunger strike, we were in communication with them and also requested to meet with Vice President Harris. That request wasn't accepted, and we also informed them that we were going to be doing this hunger strike, letting them know also when we came to Washington, D.C. from Arizona, and we have been in communication with them. However, what we want to do is meet with President Joe Biden and other senior officials in the administration who are decision makers to move this, the Freedom to Vote Act forward. And so in regards to that, there hasn't been a response.
So most of you are from Arizona, and Senator Kyrsten Sinema also from that state. And I think what's interesting for so many people is that she had been a massively vocal supporter of these bills, massively. But also, on the other hand, when we get to where we are right now, as a country, you know, she is not willing to do anything it takes. She has a hard line, and her hard line is the filibuster. This is not something she is willing to do away with the filibuster, or even discuss doing away with the filibuster to get past. You all were able to meet with her. I'm curious, and I think many of us are. How did that go?
So the conversation happened last Thursday while we were still in Arizona. I would say the meeting went as well as it could be. Both sides heard each other. Before coming into the meeting, we knew exactly where Senator Sinema stood in terms of her support for the bill and also her opinions about how to get it passed. And I would say that by the end of the meeting, we also reiterated our own stance, and that is that we are indefinitely hunger striking until the Freedom to Vote Act passes by the end of this year.
So Joe Madison, we know, political commentator, radio host, he's on the second month of a hunger strike for this very same reason. You guys are going into, well, you're in your second week. I want you to talk to our soulmates about what this experience has been like for you, the toll that it's taking on your body, that you're doing, reminiscent of the 1950s and 60s when the pastors used to do hunger strikes, people used to protest. Talk to us about the toll it's taking on your body and the toll it's taking on you guys mentally. We'll start with you, Adrian, and then go to Jocelyn.
So again, we feel like the sacrifice that all of the students are making is worth it, because we won't be able to solve any of the other issues that we care about unless we have a functional democracy. But something that really strikes me is seeing people that I care about literally choose to starve themselves and reject the biological need for food. That is something that we can all relate to, is getting hungry every day. It definitely makes me view hunger in a different way. But like you mentioned, fasting and abstaining from food is very historical and very spiritual. They have very historical and spiritual connotations. But Jocelyn, what about you?
Yes, well, I will say it's definitely taking a toll. A couple of our strikers have suspended their strike due to health reasons. We do have a medical team that is checking on us twice a day, but every day it becomes more difficult to wake up in the morning. I feel like I'm being hit by a bus of exhaustion. If I stand up too quickly, I get very lightheaded and I feel very nauseous, but there's just not much to throw up. And as Adrian was saying, what really helps ground us in this moment is understanding that the sacrifice that we are making is worth it. And we would rather endure, as our peer Brandon mentioned, 12 days without eating than endure the horrific consequences that will come with not getting this bill passed. And we are putting our bodies on the line so that no one will ever have to do this again.
So this, when we first brought this story to Fox Soul's Black Report, I was very concerned for you, for all of you, your entire team. I was so concerned because, like what you just said, I was concerned about different people's bodies reacting differently. And I'm very happy to know that there is a medical person on site that can monitor what is happening. So I was very happy to hear that. But I want to ask both of you here, you mentioned until the end of the year, but how long are you prepared to go on this hunger strike? Like Niel mentioned, the radio host, he's on in 2 months now. What is the final day where you guys just say, no, I'm done with this? I want to start with you, Jocelyn.
Sure. I would say our entire group is prepared to continue the strike indefinitely. We are hyper-focused on getting this bill passed. And as I mentioned, every day does become significantly harder, but we are willing to endure that pain. And we are constantly monitoring what is taking place politically and making assessments. But we are committed to leave everything on the playing field.
Want to know, you're in Washington, D.C. Have you spoken to any other lawmakers on Capitol Hill? Have any other lawmakers reached out to you from the Senate or the House in what you all are doing?
So we did have a meeting with Senator Mark Kelly yesterday, and he also reaffirmed his support for the Freedom to Vote Act. And similarly, we stressed our urgency to ensure that there is prioritization for voting rights and the Freedom to Vote Act above all else.
Adrian, did you want to
Yes,
add?
we also were visited by some of the members of the House of Representatives coming from Texas who have been vocal supporters of voting rights all year while this campaign has been going on. And in addition to elected officials, different executive directors from different organizations and nonprofits, community members, students, we have received a ton of support from the community. And every day we are outside the White House at Lafayette Square, and we receive a lot of love from the community and a lot of people coming to say, you are heroes. Keep fighting the good fight. You're on the right side of history. Don't stop. And so, as Jocelyn mentioned, we are monitoring the political situation as things unravel on an hour-by-hour basis, but we are prepared to strike indefinitely.
Before we let you go, I want our soulmates to be able to keep up with you. I know you guys are working with an organization called Unpack. Can you give us a little bit of information about the organization and how we can keep up and monitor what you all are doing?
Absolutely. So I am the co-founder of Unpack and serve as the national organizing director of the organization. And we started up about 9 months ago, and we came about because we noticed that there was a gap in the democracy reform space where there weren't any young people advocating for this. And that's because democracy reform isn't always an accessible issue, and let alone a policy like the Freedom to Vote Act can be very wonky. But everything we do, everything we love, every issue that a young person or anyone in general cares about is directly connected to how our democracy functions, which is why Unpack came about, because we knew that we could fill in that gap and build an infrastructure and empower young people from across the country to take action on this very important bill that impacts our entire futures. We do have a website at unpack.org, and we're also on social media. On Twitter, it's Let's Unpack, and on Instagram, it is Unpack. We welcome and appreciate the support. We have been holding it down, putting our bodies on the line for the past 12 days. But in order to really see this important legislation get passed and signed, we're going to need everyone here. So we encourage everyone, no matter who you are, what your political beliefs are, what your background, what your age, to come and put everything on the field like we are. There is a role for everyone in this movement, and it's going to impact us.
All right. Thank you so much. And our role here at the Black Report is to provide an outlet for you to come and speak your truth unapologetically. So we will be checking in with you in the weeks to come. And peace and love to both of you and everybody out there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
Wonderful. I'm so happy we were able to check in with them today. So the White House wants to mark the new year with a forceful push for voting rights, portraying the protection of the ballot as a battle for democracy itself. The White House has been considering connecting the voting rights drive with the upcoming first anniversary of the January 6th riot at the U.S. Capitol, making the case that the most sacred tenet of America's democracy remains under siege 1 year after the insurrection, fueled by the election fraud lies told by former President Donald Trump. To strongly make that case, the president and his team have been hoping to clear the legislative deck by January 6th anniversary, but The president's social spending bill, known as Build Back Better Act, appears stalled for the foreseeable future, and the Senate seemingly certain to push the measure into early 2022. So there was one thing about this story that made me just a little nervous, and it was, I want to read it. It says the White House is considering connecting the voting rights drive with the January 6th riot. And so my issue with that is that when you put it like that, it seems as if Joe Biden is nervous to just give us our own time. I don't think that these white Americans who stormed the Capitol and what they did should be connected. And yes, it's connected. Yes, they were trying to fight for, they were trying to fight for voting rights, they were trying to overthrow the election, which is voting rights. Sorry, I'm getting my point here. They were trying to fight for overthrowing the election, but I feel like we should have our own moment in time with Joe Biden, not to push everything in together, if that makes sense.
No, I get what you're saying. I also think it is interesting. He seems to kind of be saying he is taking away the power from what the people who did what it seems most people agree was a horror show that day, right?
Thank you.
Storming the Capitol. And he seems to be saying he's taking away that power. And instead of them who were trying to take away the voters' power, he's kind of doubling down on this is how it's supposed to be. So I actually find it interesting kind of putting the two there. Otherwise, it's just about the bad guys. And I don't know how many people want to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And when we just talk to the students that are putting their lives on the line and having a hunger strike, and Joe Biden is thinking about having a symbolic moment, the two just don't balance up to me. And so we know that the King family, in honor of Dr. King's birthday, they're going to have protests and rallies that are happening across the country to push for voting rights. And I just think that people are tired of symbolic gestures, words, and people want to see action. So, I mean, if that's what Joe Biden wants to do, that's fine, but that's not enough. Clearly, the students from Arizona are saying, and civil rights and black civil rights advocates are saying the same thing, that they don't want to hear that. They want to see some action. They want to see the filibuster go away, and they want to see some movement when it comes to voting rights for people of color.
You know, I have a question because I'm curious. I do think it's interesting. I guess I'm looking at it from the outside and from this space of I'm interested in why he's, wanting to put the two together, and I find it interesting, and I'm like, okay, maybe there's a point to be made. He's saying, hey, listen, what happened here that day was awful. I want to focus on what didn't happen here that day. But I wonder do you think that focusing on voting rights possibly takes away from the fact that there's been no elected official punished by what happened that day. We don't really have all of the information, and we keep being told that so much needs to be investigated, that there should be something to find out. So many people still have so many questions. There's also that point kind of hanging that this is also a year since all of these questions started being asked. And I don't know if anyone feels like they have all the answers.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone has all the answers right now.
Probably never will.
Of course, right? But back to your point here, actually both of you make a great point, is that the world needs the black vote. We've seen that before. The world needs the black vote. And so Al Sharpton, you were talking about activists, Niel. Al Sharpton, he says, if they don't do this, I'm not voting. And so then that's kind of scary now. Al Sharpton has a very strong following. And so what happens if he makes a stand to say, hey, I'm not voting? How many more people are going to maybe not vote after that as well?
Well, a lot of people don't vote. So it's interesting because when we are in election season, we have these conversations about swing voters, right? And typically, Democrats and Republicans are talking about white middle Americans, right? People who live in flyover states, people who switch back and forth every election year, depending on whether they're going to vote Democrat or whether they're going to vote Republican. But there is a story that I always refer to in The Atlantic. It was really powerful to me, and it was called The Other Swing Voter. It's a great article. Everybody should read it. And it's essentially about a large group of black Americans, a group who are heavily Democrat, these voters, and they swing back and forth every election, every presidential election year, between voting Democrat or not voting because they don't feel heard. They don't feel like, any of their wishes are being granted, any policies that they're pushing for, they don't feel like they ever get what they want. And while there's a big conversation about the need to vote, right, it also matters how, the large number of people who are not moved.
But when we're talking about voting, let's talk about what's happening on Capitol Hill right now. the Build Back Better bill is stalled. And in relation to, they won't say it, but it's because of the Voting Rights Act. We know that Senator Raphael Warnock, he wasn't even going to vote on a couple of things because he said it was hypocritical of them to bypass the filibuster, to vote to get, not do the filibuster for one thing, but you can't do it for Voting Rights Act. So I think that you're going to see a lot of things at play right now. You're going to see voters who are going to say, like Reverend Al Sharpton, he's going to start saying, I'm not voting. People are going to say, I'm not voting. And then you're going to see lawmakers, because the Congressional Black Caucus has a charge to speak up for Black people. And so the pressure is going to even become on the Congressional Black Caucus to do something about it. And if Biden doesn't have those votes to support his infrastructure bill, the Buy Back Better plan, and all of that, it's going to be a big mess. So it's a good thing that voting rights is right at the center. And last note into the point that you made, Demi, about relating the two or what's going to happen, we still have that committee that is investigating the January 6th riots. And there's going to be some information coming out about the lawmakers that you guys brought up, accountability and things like that. So there's so many things at play, but at the core and the epicenter for Black people, it's voting rights, and we want it now.
All right, let's move on to our next story out of Florida. The governor there, Ron DeSantis, he says he'll push for legislation to ban teaching critical race theory in schools. He also says he supports legislation that would allow private corporate employees to sue their employers if they receive critical race theory training. DeSantis is calling his proposal the Stop Woke Act. He's using woke as an acronym for wrongs to our kids and employees. This is interesting. Also, I'm pretty sure the Florida School Board has already come out and banned critical race theory teaching. Also, I think it's always important because words matter, regardless of how the word is being used. Words matter, and critical race theory is not taught at the middle school, elementary school, high school level. It is not. It's illegal theory. It's at best taught in law school. That would probably be the first time your child would learn critical race theory. He is specifically talking about something else, but not using those words. And I think, listen, words matter. But something happened in his speech yesterday. It was a huge speech, and he invoked Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. King, which is what many people do. And he said this. He said, you think about what MLK stood for. He said he didn't want people judged on the color of their skin, but on the content of their character. So that is actually not true. And because I think that that's a quote specifically that's always used, and people will shout down Dr. King's children who try to break down what it actually means. But you could also just go to what he actually said. He said, I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin. He's talking about 4 Black children, his children, and obviously other children who look like them, and the reality that they don't live in a world that doesn't judge them by the color of their skin. And his dream is equity, right? His dream is fairness, so that they can live in a world where they are treated fairly. The reason there's facts around them not being treated fairly, and when we talk about Black history, when we talk about, just kind of being honest about society, those are the facts that would go in when we start teaching some of these things that we're banning.
Right? But you know what, Brooke, I'm so glad you broke that down, because that's what everyone was talking about. Like, I was like, how dare you bring up MLK and try to drive your point home?
And then also say you can't talk about him. You can't teach about him in the classroom.
Listen, but this is exactly why children, white, Black, American, Asian, doesn't matter, you need to have we'll say Black history. You need to have Black history, because here you are, a white man, misinterpreting the whole, you just took a whole MLK passage and rewrote it and made it seem like it was something that it really wasn't. And that is why you need to get Black history, so you can know exactly about our people. You misinterpreted the whole point of what he was saying. And so now there are going to be so many people in the world, white Americans that listen to him, that are going to think that that is what MLK said, and that's not what he said. He also said, just one more point, Neil, he said he also doesn't want taxpayer dollars to be used to teach our kids to hate our country and hate each other. And that is not right either. That is not what even if critical race theory was taught to you in preschool, critical race theory is not going to teach white Americans to hate the country. It's not going to teach white Americans to hate each other. That is not the point of it at all.
Well, Republicans, they're good at knowing who their audience is. He's not talking to us. He's talking to one audience, and those are his Republican constituents. So let's be clear about that. Second thought is it's totally disrespectful to use an acronym like woke when he knows it's a black term. But once again, Republicans are good at knowing who they're talking to. They're not talking to Democrats. They're not talking to people of color. They're not talking to woke people. They're talking to their base. And so when we talk about these types of things, these are the things that we have to worry about. We were just talking about voting rights. These are all the things that are going to lead up and matter in the midterms. That's why Republicans have over 18 states that have voter suppression laws. So they're getting rid of the voting rights for people of color because they're scared of 2022. And then when we talk about black history, it's not critical race theory, it's black history. They don't want the truth to be told. They want to preserve their whiteness that they have created in textbooks. And that's what the Republican Party wants to do. You have to give them a hats off to the fact that they are very deliberate and intentional with who they're talking to and pushing those points. But at the end of the day, all of this is brewing. All of this is brewing to something that may be very detrimental to the 2022 midterms. When we look at these types of conversations that are coming out of the Republican Party, it's really scary as we look at the new year.